a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. John Lennon. John Winston Ono Lennon was an English singer, songwriter, and peace activist who co-founded the Beatles, the most commercially successful band in the history of popular music. He and fellow member Paul McCartney formed a much-celebrated songwriting partnership. Along with George Harrison and Ringo Starr, the group would ascend to worldwide fame during the 1960s. He was born as John Winston Lennon in Liverpool, where he became involved in the skiffle craze as a teenager. In 1957, he formed his first band, the Quarrymen, which evolved into the Beatles in 1960. Lennon began to record as a solo artist before the band's breakup in April 1970. Two of those songs were Give Peace a Chance and Instant Karma. Lennon subsequently produced albums that included John Lennon/Plastic Ono Band and Imagine, and songs such as Working Class Hero, Imagine, and Happy Christmas. After he married Yoko Ono in 1969, he added Ono as one of his middle names. Lennon disengaged himself from the music business in 1975 to raise his infant son Sean, but re-emerged with Ono in 1980 with the album Double Fantasy. He was shot and killed in the archway of his Manhattan apartment building 3 weeks after the album was released. Lennon revealed a rebellious nature and acerbic wit in his music, writing, drawings, on film and in interviews. Controversial through his political and peace activism, he moved from London to Manhattan in 1971, where his criticism of the Vietnam War resulted in a lengthy attempt by the Nixon administration to deport him. Some of his songs were adopted as anthems by the anti-war movement and the larger counterculture. By 2012, Lennon's solo album sales in the United States had exceeded 14 million units. He had 25 #1 singles on the US Billboard Hot 100 chart as a writer, co-writer, or performer. In 2002, Lennon was voted 8th in a BBC poll of the 100 Greatest Britons, and in 2008, Rolling Stone ranked him the 5th greatest singer of all time. In 1987, he was posthumously inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Lennon was twice posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, first in 1988 as a member of the Beatles and again in 1994 as a solo artist. 1940-1957, Early years. Lennon was born on the 9th of October 1940 at Liverpool Maternity Hospital, to Julia and Alfred Lennon. Alfred was a merchant seaman of Irish descent who was away at the time of his son's birth. His parents named him John Winston Lennon after his paternal grandfather, John Jack Lennon, and Prime Minister Winston Churchill. His father was often away from home, but sent regular paychecks to 9 Newcastle Road, Liverpool, where Lennon lived with his mother. The checks stopped when he went absent without leave in February 1944. When he eventually came home 6 months later, he offered to look after the family, but Julia, by then pregnant with another man's child, rejected the idea. After her sister Mimi complained to Liverpool's social services twice, Julia gave her custody of Lennon. In July 1946, Lennon's father visited her and took his son to Blackpool, secretly intending to emigrate to New Zealand with him. Julia followed them, with her partner at the time, Bobby Dykins, and after a heated argument his father forced the 5-year-old to choose between them. Lennon twice chose his father, but as his mother walked away, he began to cry and followed her, although this has been disputed. According to author Mark Lewison, Lennon's parents agreed that Julia should take him and give him a home as Alf left again. A witness who was there that day, Billy Hall, has said the dramatic scene often portrayed with a young John Lennon having to make a decision between his parents never happened. It would be 20 years before he had contact with his father again. Throughout the rest of his childhood and adolescence, Lennon lived at Mendips, 251 Menlove Avenue, Wilton, with Mimi and her husband George Toogood Smith, who had no children of their own. His aunt purchased volumes of short stories for him, and his uncle, a dairyman at his family's farm, bought him a mouth organ and engaged him in solving puzzles. Julia visited Mendips on a regular basis, and when John was 11 years old he often visited her at 1 Blomfield Road, Liverpool, where she played him Elvis Presley records, taught him the banjo, and showed him how to play Ain't That a Shame by Fats Domino. In September 1980, Lennon commented about his family and his rebellious nature. He regularly visited his cousin, Stanley Parks, who lived in Fleetwood, and took him on trips to local cinemas. During the school holidays, Parks often visited Lennon with Layla Harvey, another cousin, and the threesome often travelled to Blackpool 2 or 3 times a week to watch shows. They would visit the Blackpool Tower Circus and see artists such as Dickie Valentine, Arthur Askey, Max Bygraves, and Joe Loss, with Parks recalling that Lennon particularly liked George Formby. After Parks' family moved to Scotland, the 3 cousins often spent their school holidays together there. Parks recalled, "John, cousin Layla and I were very close. From Edinburgh we would drive up to the family croft at Durness, which was from about the time John was 9 years old until he was about 16. He was 14 years old when his uncle George died of a liver hemorrhage on the 5th of June 1955, at age 52. Lennon was raised as an Anglican and attended Dovedale Primary School. After passing his 11+ exam, he attended Quarrymen High School in Liverpool from September 1952 to 1957, and was described by Harvey at the time as a happy-go-lucky, good-humoured, easy-going, lively lad. He often drew comical cartoons that appeared in his own self-made school magazine called The Daily Howl, but despite his artistic talent, his school reports were damning, certainly on the road to failure. Hopeless. Rather a clown in class. Wasting other pupils' time. In 2005, the National Postal Museum in the US acquired a stamp collection that Lennon had assembled when he was a boy. In 1956, Julia bought John his first guitar. The instrument was an inexpensive Galatone Champion acoustic, for which she lent her son £5.10 on the condition that the guitar be delivered to her own house and not Mimi's. Knowing well that her sister was not supportive of her son's musical aspirations, Mimi was skeptical of his claim that he would be famous one day, and she hoped that he would grow bored with music, often telling him, "The guitar's all very well, John, but you'll never make a living out of it." On the 15th of July 1958, his mother was struck and killed by a car while she was walking home after visiting the Smiths' house. Lennon failed his O-level examinations and was accepted into the Liverpool College of Art after his aunt and headmaster intervened. Once at the college, he started wearing teddy boy clothes and was threatened with expulsion for his behaviour. He was thrown out of the college before his final year. 1957-1966, formation, commercial breakout and touring years. At age 15, Lennon formed the skiffle group, the Quarrymen. Named after Quarrymen High School, the group was established by Lennon in September 1956. By the summer of 1957, the Quarrymen played a spirited set of songs, made up of half skiffle and half rock and roll. Lennon first met Paul McCartney at the Quarrymen's second performance, which was held in Walton on the 6th of July at the St. Peter's Church Garden Fete. Lennon then asked McCartney to join the band. McCartney said that Aunt Mimi was very aware that John's friends were lower class, and would often patronize him when he arrived to visit Lennon. According to Paul's brother Mike, McCartney's father was also disapproving, declaring that Lennon would get his son into trouble, although he later allowed the fledgling band to rehearse in the McCartney's front room at 24th Lynn Road. During this time, 18-year-old Lennon wrote his first song, Hello Little Girl, a UK top 10 hit for the foremost nearly 5 years later. McCartney recommended his friend George Harrison to be the lead guitarist. Lennon thought that Harrison, then 14 years old, was too young. McCartney engineered an audition on the upper deck of a Liverpool bus, where Harrison played raunchy for Lennon and was asked to join. Stuart Sutcliffe, Lennon's friend from art school, later joined as bassist. Lennon, McCartney, Harrison and Sutcliffe became the Beatles in early 1960. In August that year, the Beatles engaged for a 48-night residency in Hamburg, Germany, and were desperately in need of a drummer. They asked Pete Best to join them. Lennon was now 19, and his aunt, horrified when he told her about the trip, pleaded with him to continue his art studies instead. After the first Hamburg residency, the band accepted another in April 1961, and a third in April 1962. As with the other band members, Lennon was introduced to Prelude while in Hamburg, and regularly took the drug as a stimulant during their long, overnight performances. Brian Epstein managed the Beatles from 1962 until his untimely death in 1967. He had no prior experience managing artists, but he had a strong influence on the group's dress code and attitude on stage. Lennon initially resisted his attempts to encourage the band to present a professional appearance, but eventually complied, saying, "I'll wear a bloody balloon if somebody's going to pay me." McCartney took over on bass after Sutcliffe decided to stay in Hamburg, and Pete Best was replaced with drummer Ringo Starr. This completed the four-piece lineup that would remain until the group's breakup in 1970. The band's first single, Love Me Do, was released in October 1962 and reached number 17 on the British charts. They recorded their debut album, Please Please Me, in under 10 hours on the 11th of February 1963. A day when Lennon was suffering the effects of a cold, which is evident in the vocal on the last song to be recorded that day, Twist and Shout. The Lennon-McCartney songwriting partnership yielded 8 of its 14 tracks. With a few exceptions, one being the album title itself, Lennon had yet to bring his love of wordplay to bear on his song lyrics, saying, "We were just writing songs, pop songs with no more thought of them than that, to create a sound. And the words were almost irrelevant." In a 1987 interview, McCartney said that the other Beatles idolized John. "He was like our own little Elvis. We all looked up to John. He was older and he was very much the leader. He was the quickest wit and the smartest." The Beatles achieved mainstream success in the UK early in 1963. Lennon was on tour when his first son, Julian, was born in April. During their Royal Variety Show performance, which was attended by the Queen Mother and other British royalty, Lennon poked fun at the audience. "For our next song, I'd like to ask for your help. For the people in the cheaper seats, clap your hands. And the rest of you, if you'll just rattle your jewelry." After a year of Beatlemania in the UK, the group's historic February 1964 US debut appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show marked their breakthrough to international stardom. A 2-year period of constant touring, filmmaking, and songwriting followed, during which Lennon wrote 2 books, in his own right and A Spaniard in the works. The Beatles received recognition from the British establishment when they were appointed members of the Order of the British Empire in the 1965 Queen's Birthday Honours. Lennon grew concerned that fans who attended Beatles concerts were unable to hear the music above the screaming of fans, and that the band's musicianship was beginning to suffer as a result. Lennon's "Help" expressed his own feelings in 1965. "I meant it. It was me singing help." He had put on weight, and felt he was subconsciously seeking change. In March that year he was unknowingly introduced to LSD when a dentist, hosting a dinner party attended by Lennon, Harrison and their wives, spiked the guests' coffee with the drug. When they wanted to leave, their host revealed what they had taken, and strongly advised them not to leave the house, because of the likely effects. Later, in a lift at a nightclub, they all believed it was on fire. "We were all screaming, hot and hysterical." In March 1966, during an interview with Evening Standard reporter Maureen Cleave, Lennon remarked, "Christianity will go. It will vanish and shrink. We're more popular than Jesus now. I don't know which will go first, rock and roll or Christianity." The comment went virtually unnoticed in England, but caused great offense in the US when quoted by a magazine there 5 months later. The furore that followed, which included the burning of Beatles records, Ku Klux Klan activity and threats against Lennon, contributed to the band's decision to stop touring. 1967-1970, studio years, breakup and solo work. After the Beatles' final concert on the 29th of August 1966, Lennon was deprived of the routine of live performances. He felt lost and considered leaving the band. Since his involuntary introduction to LSD, he had increased his use of the drug and was almost constantly under its influence for much of 1967. According to biographer Ian MacDonald, Lennon's continuous experimentation with LSD during the year brought him close to erasing his identity. The year 1967 saw the release of Strawberry Fields Forever, hailed by Time magazine for its astonishing inventiveness and the group's landmark album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which revealed lyrics by Lennon that contrasted strongly with the simple love songs of the Lennon-McCartney early years. After the Beatles were introduced to the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the group attended an August weekend of personal instruction at his Transcendental Meditation Seminar in Bangor, Wales. During the seminar, they were informed of Epstein's death. "I knew we were in trouble then," Lennon said later. "I didn't have any misconceptions about our ability to do anything other than play music, and I was scared." Led primarily by Harrison and Lennon's interest in Eastern religion, the Beatles later travelled to Maharishi's ashram in India for further guidance. While there, they composed most of the songs for the Beatles and Abbey Road. The anti-war, black comedy How I Won the War, featuring Lennon's only appearance in a non-Beatles full-length film, was shown in cinemas in October 1967. McCartney organized the group's first post-Epstein project, the self-written, produced, and directed television film Magical Mystery Tour, which was released in December that year. While the film itself proved to be their first critical flop, its soundtrack release, featuring Lennon's acclaimed Lewis Carroll-inspired I Am the Walrus, was a success. With Epstein gone, the band members became increasingly involved in business activities, and in February 1968 they formed Apple Corp., a multimedia corporation composed of Apple Records and several other subsidiary companies. Lennon described the venture as an attempt to achieve artistic freedom within a business structure. But his increased drug experimentation and growing preoccupation with Yoko Ono, combined with the Beatles' inability to agree on how the company should be run, left Apple in need of professional management. Lennon asked Lord Beeching to take on the role, but he declined, advising Lennon to go back to making records. Lennon was approached by Alan Klein, who had managed the Rolling Stones and other bands during the British invasion. In early 1969, Klein was appointed as Apple's chief executive by Lennon, Harrison, and Starr, but McCartney never signed the management contract. At the end of 1968, Lennon was featured in the film The Rolling Stones' Rock and Roll Circus in the role of a Dirty Mac band member. The film was not released until 1996. The supergroup, composed of Lennon, Eric Clapton, Keith Richards, and Mitch Mitchell, also backed a vocal performance by Ono in the film. Lennon and Ono were married on the 20th of March 1969, and soon released a series of 14 lithographs called Bag One, depicting scenes from their honeymoon, 8 of which were deemed indecent and most of which were banned and confiscated. Lennon's creative focus continued to move beyond the Beatles, and between 1968 and 1969 he and Ono recorded 3 albums of experimental music together: Unfinished Music No. 1, Two Virgins, Unfinished Music No. 2, Life with the Lions and Wedding Album. In 1969, they formed the Plastic Ono Band, releasing Live Peace in Toronto, 1969. Between 1969 and 1970, Lennon released the singles Give Peace a Chance, which was widely adopted as an anti-Vietnam War anthem in 1969, Cold Turkey, which documented his withdrawal symptoms after he became addicted to heroin, and Instant Karma, in protest at Britain's involvement in the Nigeria-Biafra Thing, its support of America in the Vietnam War, and against Cold Turkey, slipping down the charts. Lennon returned his MBE medal to the Queen, though this had no effect on his MBE status, which could not be renounced. Lennon left the Beatles in September 1969 and agreed not to inform the media while the group renegotiated their recording contract. But he was outraged that McCartney publicized his own departure on releasing his debut solo album in April 1970. Lennon's reaction was, "Jesus Christ. He gets all the credit for it." He later wrote, "I started the band. I disbanded it. It's as simple as that." In later interviews with Rolling Stone magazine, he revealed his bitterness towards McCartney, saying, "I was a fool not to do what Paul did, which was use it to sell a record." Lennon also spoke of the hostility he perceived the other members had towards Ono, and of how he, Harrison, and Starr got fed up with being sidemen for Paul. "After Brian Epstein died we collapsed. Paul took over and supposedly led us. But what is leading us when we went round in circles. 1970, 1972, initial solo success and activism. In 1970, Lennon and Ono went through primal therapy with Arthur Janov in Los Angeles, California. Designed to release emotional pain from early childhood, the therapy entailed 2 half-days a week with Janov for 4 months. He had wanted to treat the couple for longer, but they felt no need to continue and returned to London. Lennon's debut solo album, John Lennon / Plastic Ono Band, was received with praise by many music critics, but its highly personal lyrics and stark sound limited its commercial performance. Critic Greil Marcus remarked, "John singing in the last verse of God may be the finest in all of rock." The album featured the song, Mother, in which Lennon confronted his feelings of childhood rejection, and the Dylan-esque, working-class hero. A bitter attack against the bourgeois social system which, due to the lyric, "You're still fucking peasants," fell foul of broadcasters. The same year, Tarek Ali expressed his revolutionary political views when he interviewed Lennon. This inspired the singer to write, "Power to the People." Lennon also became involved with Ali during a protest against the prosecution of Oz magazine for alleged obscenity. Lennon denounced the proceedings as "disgusting fascism," and he and Ono released the single, "God Save Us / Do the Oz," and joined marches in support of the magazine. Eager for a major commercial success, Lennon adopted a more accessible sound for his next album, Imagine. Rolling Stone reported that it contains a substantial portion of good music, but warned of the possibility that his posturings will soon seem not merely dull, but irrelevant. The album's title track later became an anthem for anti-war movements, while the song, "How Do You Sleep?" was a musical attack on McCartney in response to lyrics on Ram that Lennon felt, and McCartney later confirmed, were directed at him and Ono. Lennon softened his stance in the mid-1970s, however, and said he had written, "How Do You Sleep?" about himself. He said in 1980, "I used my resentment against Paul to create a song. Not a terrible, vicious, horrible vendetta. I used my resentment and withdrawing from Paul and the Beatles, and the relationship with Paul, to write How Do You Sleep? I don't really go round with those thoughts in my head all the time." Lennon and Ono moved to New York in August 1971 and released Happy Christmas in December. During the new year, the Nixon administration took what it called a strategic countermeasure against Lennon's anti-war and anti-Nixon propaganda. The administration embarked on what would be a 4-year attempt to deport him. After George McGovern lost the presidential election to Richard Nixon in 1972, Lennon and Ono attended a post-election wake held in the New York home of activist Jerry Rubin. Lennon was embroiled in a continuing legal battle with the immigration authorities, and he was denied permanent residency in the U.S. The issue would not be resolved until 1976. Lennon was depressed and got intoxicated. He left Ono embarrassed after he had sex with a female guest. Her song, "Death of Samantha," was inspired by the incident. Sometime in New York City was recorded as a collaboration with Ono, and was released in 1972 with backing from the New York band Elephant's Memory. A double LP, it contained songs about women's rights, race relations, Britain's role in Northern Ireland, and Lennon's difficulties in obtaining a green card. The album was a commercial failure and was maligned by critics, who found its political sloganeering heavy-handed and relentless. The NME's review took the form of an open letter in which Tony Tyler derided Lennon as a pathetic, aging revolutionary. In the US, "Woman is the Nigger of the World" was released as a single from the album, and was televised on the 11th of May, on The Dick Cavett Show. Many radio stations refused to broadcast the song, because of the word, "nigger." Lennon and Ono gave 2 benefit concerts with Elephant's Memory, and guests in New York in aid of patients at the Willowbrook State School Mental Facility. Staged at Madison Square Garden on the 30th of August 1972, they were his last full-length concert appearances. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like